Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a massive, and I mean massive, blind spot in enterprise AI. We constantly hear about this frantic race to adopt artificial intelligence, right? But the reality is, scaling it across an entire organization takes something called an AI control plane. This is that intelligent underlying layer that governs who acts, what data actually gets accessed, and how your AI agents operate in the wild. But here's the catch. There is a huge missing process layer that almost everyone is completely overlooking. So today, we're unpacking a really urgent mandate from the Deloitte Center for Integrated Research regarding this exact infrastructure, and a genuinely brilliant response to it by John Cachet, the creator of the Integrated Process Excellence model. Let's map out exactly what this missing layer is and how you can actually deploy it. Okay, let's dive into this with a serious reality check straight from the Deloitte report. They say, treat the next 12 to 24 months as a foundation-building period rather than a finish line to a fully agentic enterprise. Basically, Deloitte is literally telling us that the priority right now isn't some mad dash to just hand over the keys to fully autonomous AI agents. No way. Instead, this next 1 to 2 years is a absolutely critical fleeting window. It's the time to architect a strong, governed foundation. You desperately need a highly controlled infrastructure to mediate your data and manage workloads well before those AI agents can safely run your business. Which naturally brings us to the elephant in the room. But how do we actually build it? Deloitte's report is super thorough about what this control plane has to accomplish, for sure. But it is largely silent on how an enterprise practically goes about defining the specific process-level capabilities needed to govern these AI agents. I mean, we can't just guess our way through enterprise-grade AI governance, right? We need a concrete, repeatable methodology. To really understand the gap we're dealing with, we first have to look at what Deloitte says we actually need. They organize this AI control plane around 3 core pillars. First up is architecture, which securely and flexibly exposes your enterprise capabilities. Pretty standard. Once you have that, you need orchestration. This coordinates the models, your AI agents, and your workloads across the entire enterprise. And then, wrapping all of that together is cybersecurity resilience to ensure strict control. This establishes identity, authority, and integrity across both human and machine interactions. So those are your 3 essential pillars for mediating data and executing tasks securely. But here is where we hit a glaring implementation gap. There is a massive fundamental difference between simply naming a capability and actually defining one. Deloitte's report tells enterprises, hey, start with a capability-centric architecture. But honestly, just naming a capability, that's just an architectural aspiration. It's a goal. Before a capability can be exposed through some secure service layer, someone actually has to define what that capability is, its exact purpose, its inputs, outputs, its owner, and the explicit boundaries separating it from other tasks. A control plane can enforce boundaries once they exist? Absolutely, but it can't just generate them out of thin air. You need a proven method. And that is exactly where John Cachet's Integrated Process Excellence, or IPE framework, steps in. Rooted in some incredibly solid foundational process methodologies, specifically Roger Slater's 1996 work, IPE is essentially a continuous loop. It starts with creating the right cultural environment, moves into strict definition and documentation, establishes firm controls, and then circles right back to continuous improvement. It's the exact missing puzzle piece that elegantly snaps right into that implementation gap left by Deloitte. And the best part? It's built to govern not just human operators, but that complex AI agent layer too. Let's break down exactly how this works. Let's start with Deloitte's first pillar, architecture. Deloitte wants this capability-centric design. Well, look at how perfectly that maps to step 2 of the IPA framework, which directly produces SIPOC-style boundaries. Now, SIPOC stands for suppliers, inputs, process, outputs, and customers. Think of it kind of like running a massive commercial kitchen. You need to know exactly where the ingredients come from, exactly how they're cooked, and exactly who is eating the meal, so absolutely nothing is left to chance. This step gives you a concrete mapping of the purpose, inputs, outputs, owners, and boundaries for every single process. It literally takes Deloitte's architectural aspiration and turns it into a strictly defined, fully auditable unit of work. Because without this, your so-called AI capability is really just an API with zero governing process behind it. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we solve Deloitte's second pillar, orchestration. Orchestration has to figure out in real time which AI model should handle a specific task based on cost, latency, and regulatory constraints. But how on earth does it know those variables? Well, in IPE Step 3, you apply the KIV, KPV, KOV architecture. This links key input variables, key process variables, and key output variables to form a totally measurable, auditable chain of cause and effect. This specific architecture feeds the orchestration layer the actual math and hard rules it desperately needs to make governed routing decisions, rather than just taking a wild heuristic guess. All right, so for Deloitte's third pillar, cybersecurity resilience, the trust layer basically has to enforce runtime guardrails and isolate compromised paths. You can map this directly to IPE steps 5 and 6, which are all about controlling and improving the process. Step 5 monitors process variations against those key variables we literally just talked about, providing a pre-built control limit architecture that your trust layer can simply consume on the fly. Step 6 then supplies the root cause analysis and institutionalizes a lessons learned loop. Look, the sheer speed of AI means human control limits absolutely must be pre-built and automated. When an AI agent spits out an anomalous output, you don't just sit there and build a better wall. You detect, respond, and permanently correct the process way faster than an attacker can ever exploit it.
But, what about the humans in all of this? We definitely can't forget them. Deloitte specifically warns against automation bias and stresses that human judgment must remain central to the whole shebang. Well, IPE directly addresses this through steps 1 and 4, which focus on creating a positive environment and communicating the process. These steps provide that vital connective organizational tissue. They ensure shared process ownership, critical visual controls, ongoing training, and two-way feedback. Because let's be real, a control plane fails organizationally way before it fails technically if the people who actually own a process aren't held accountable for its boundaries.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when we put all of this together in one view. The synergy here is just undeniable. Every single abstract requirement Deloitte demands, from architecture all the way to cybersecurity, finds a concrete, actionable artifact produced by the IPE framework. Your architecture relies on the defining step for those SIPOC boundaries. Orchestration relies on the documentation step for routing variables. Cybersecurity relies on controlling and improving for control limits and root cause analysis. And that crucial organizational foundation? It's secured by fostering the right environment and communication. Literally every Deloitte capability fundamentally relies on a process artifact that the IPE framework is explicitly built to produce. So, the crucial point is this. Deloitte recommends building a foundation that can survive whether a huge, concentrated hyperscaler ecosystem wins the market or some federated edge architecture takes over. The beauty here is that IP&E is completely paradigm agnostic. Your process definitions, your ownership boundaries, your control limits, they are all defined entirely independent of any specific cloud provider or AI vendor. Because a good process definition survives any tech stack change, building this foundation protects your organization no matter which technological paradigm eventually dominates the future. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Okay, this sounds like a massive undertaking, like I'm starting from a blank whiteboard. But you really don't have to. John Catchett has actually developed what are called IP packs. These are sector-specific process intelligence libraries that apply this exact framework to specific industries. There are already pre-populated starting points spanning 17 different domains in healthcare alone, plus manufacturing, steel, pharmaceuticals, and even plastic injection molding. These packs are already built on the robust KIV, KPV, KOV architecture we discussed, giving your enterprise a massive, ready-to-go head start in defining its capabilities. If you take absolutely only one thing away from today's explainer, please let it be this: choose your process before your platform. Enterprise leaders absolutely must secure their governed, auditable capability definitions before locking their critical budgets into any specific AI control plane vendor. The technology will inevitably shift, that's a given, but a rigorously defined process is the bedrock that will keep your enterprise secure, compliant, and genuinely intelligent. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Take a hard look at your current AI roadmap. Are you simply naming your enterprise AI capabilities on a slick PowerPoint presentation, or are you ready to actually define them at the granular, auditable process level? Remember, you have a 12 to 24-month window to get this right. It's time to stop guessing and start applying rigorous frameworks like IPE to build an unshakable foundation. The future of your enterprise AI literally depends on the process layer you build today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I can't wait to explore more complex topics with you next time.